Welcome to the Comedy Film Funnel. This is episode number 2, and my name is Suzen Tekla-Kriglenska. My co-host is, introduce yourself, please, sir.
I am cartoonist, author, and the minister of funk, Joe Dater.
Indeed. And the movie we're going to be looking at this episode is 1994's Cabin Boy.
Yay!
Yay!
I am thrilled. I'm excited.
So this episode is brought to you by Inabender. I knew I'd screw that up. This episode is brought to you by Einbender Flypaper. Einbender Flypaper. Let me do that again.
The name you've gradually grown to trust.
I'm happy to say this episode is brought to you by Einbender. Am I saying that right? The brand you've gradually grown to trust over the course of 3 generations. And Monongahela. That's it. The Monongahela Metal Foundry, casting steel ingots with the housewife in mind. So yeah, that's.
I'm supposed to be Ray to that.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that later. That's a reference, but I mean, I think we should do that every episode anyway.
Yeah,
just rip off Bob and Ray every goddamn episode.
Well, I think that's the best place to go if you're going to steal from the best.
Might as well.
Or from his family.
This podcast, just so you know, we cover a different comedy film every episode. We also have a Patreon. We will have bonus content on the Patreon, which we'll talk about as we go along. Okay, so again, we are doing Cabin Boy.
It's painfully obvious to me that you have no idea who you're dealing with here. You see, I am a fancy lad.
We are both really excited about this. We picked this as the second movie because it's right at the top of our list, of course. So before we even begin talking about it, Joe, what do you remember the first time you saw Cabin Boy? What does it mean to you? Why is it important to you? Why were you excited that we were doing this?
Well, I was excited because it's a movie that is not loved as much as it should be, although it's much more loved than it used to be. And I think it's a movie that is one of the 2 movies that came out in 1994 that I was excited to see because it was right up my alley, as they used to say. So far up my alley, it hurts a little bit, kinda. In fact, those 2 movies both share a cast member, and we'll get into that later on. I don't have a specific memory of where and when I went to see it, but I'm sure that I would have seen it on opening day in the middle of the day, and I would have gone by myself. And that's probably one of the reasons I enjoyed it when I saw it. I feel bad for someone who saw it, say, on a date, or thought that they were with a group of friends and thought this would be a good choice for a Friday night at the movies. It would not be. It's a good movie to see if you're a comedy nerd and you go to see it in the middle of the day by yourself.
Yes.
I don't think this is a movie for people who date. I think it's a movie for people who are lonely and dejected and very, very much ostracized by their community, possibly. And, you know.
It's certainly what happened to its makers.
It's certainly what happened to the people who made the movie, yeah.
Yeah. This is I don't know if we'll get sick of doing this on this podcast, but I like listing the movies that came out that year. I mean, eventually we're going to be repeating ourselves, but in 1994, The Lion King was one of the big movies. I believe that was the number 1 movie, actually. Forrest Gump was up there. Yep. True Lies, the James Cameron movie, which I remember being pretty good. The Flintstones was one of the huge blockbusters of the year, believe it or not.
And I also went to see that by myself during the day in a movie.
Really? Wow.
Yes, I did.
Jeez. Hudsucker Proxy and Shawshank Redemption, which I always have twinned in my brain. Natural Born Killers. Stargate. That was a fun movie. Pulp Fiction.
Of course.
I'm one of the only people on the planet. I am not a Pulp Fiction fan. Interview with a Vampire. The Usual Suspects. Mask and Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. Dumb and Dumber.
No, The Mask, you mean.
Dumb and Dumber, Clerks, Ed Wood, which we will be referring to in this movie. Reality Bites.
That was the other one I was talking about. I was excited about.
Ed Wood. I saw that in the theater too. I absolutely remember being in the theater watching Ed Wood. Speed. I'll just do a few more. Heavenly Creatures, which is one of my favorite movies in the entire universe. That's when I fell in love with Kate Winslet. Still am in love with her.
Most people in the U.S.'s introduction to Peter Jackson, but those of us who were really nerdy knew about him from his low budget, super gory horror movies that he had made before that. His Muppet porn movie.
Crumb, which was is an amazing documentary everybody should go see about Robert Crumb. Speaking of cartoonists,
film, yeah.
Jan van Svenkmeyer's Fast, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, Muriel's Wedding, we love. And so that's some of the stuff that was going on in 1994. Yeah. I'll just say that I don't remember seeing Cabin Boy in the theater, but there's a pretty good chance I did because I was a big Chris Elliott fan. I just don't remember it. But I do remember I saw in the future years twice I got to see Chris Elliott do a screening of Cabin Boy with a Q&A. One of them was with my new friend Joe Dater. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember you and I went to see a screening and Q&A with Chris Elliott and the director Adam Resnick.
Yeah, that was pretty early in our friendship. But before that, before I even met you, before I knew you existed, maybe just saw your cartoons in the New Yorker, I went with my friend, co-host to the Bill Nye podcast, Science Rules! Corey Powell. We went to see that very same thing. This was in the years, sometime in the 2000s. That was a really early showing. I think it was pretty early on when Chris Elliott was still kind of like, couldn't believe people actually liked this movie. He was really warm that we were, this audience was so enthusiastic.
At the screening you and I went to, we got to meet Chris after the film, and he posed for a photo with me, and he signed my book that I had brought of Daddy's Boy, my copy of Daddy's Boy, the book he wrote with his father, Bob Elliott.
And I accidentally turned your flash off, and if we can dig up.
It's not a great picture.
If we can dig up that image, I screwed it up. I screwed up your photo with Chris Elliott.
It's not a great picture, but the memory, I'll cherish the memory forever because Chris Elliott was so nice and so kind and so warm, and it was a real pleasure meeting him.
Now, I did another Chris Elliott screw up with you later in our friendship, and I'll get to that later. I have many apologies.
Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. And I've been waiting for that apology for many years. I have no idea what she's talking about.
I'm watching you, Susan. I'm watching you.
I'm going to be watching you, Dave.
I'll be watching you.
I'm watching you, Dave.
Okay, fine.
Watching you. Watching everything you do.
Okay, so...
Well, while we're talking about the other movies of 1994, I want to ask you a question, and I want to pose this question is, do you think the reason Cabin Boy did not do well with either critics or audiences is because it was just too similar to Jane Campion's The Piano?
It was. There's a beach.
Yeah.
I believe there was a beach. Waves,
I think it
ocean water.
Suffered from being virtually the same film.
Yeah. You can't have that many of those movies out in one year.
Yeah. People are like, we've seen this already.
So let me give a little intro to Cabin Boy. Now, I'm learning doing this podcast, videocast, why people have bifocals. Now it all makes sense. I just never got it till now. But so I'm going to be doing a lot of this and all kinds of fidgeting with lights and papers and computer. So Cabin Boy, starring obviously Chris Elliott, written by Adam Resnick, who is a person who also worked at the Letterman show. They still are, to this day, best friends. So Adam wrote it. They came up with the idea together, and Adam wrote it and directed it. And we'll get a little bit more into this later, but they moved on to doing a television series for Fox, an early Fox show called Get a Life, which many people love dearly and many people hate dearly. And Tim Burton was a fan of Get a Life and actually contacted them and said, I'd like you to do a movie. What he wanted to do was another Pee-wee's Big Adventure kind of movie, because he had just gotten under his belt Batman and all these huge blockbuster, very, very high budget, shiny, fancy, movies. And he wanted to kind of go back to his roots and do something like a Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And he thought that would be something that Chris could pull off. So he contacted Chris reeled in Adam Resnick. They wrote up a script, sent it to Tim. He was like, yeah, love it. And then he pulled out. He was going to direct it and he pulled out. He instead decided to do Ed Wood, which came out the same year. And so he said, but please go forward with the project. I'll produce it, but you guys need to direct it and just go ahead and do it. Don't worry. People will help you out. You'll be able to do this. And Adam Resnick claims he did not want to direct it, but was, kind of talked into it. And they just thought, well, I guess it's crazy to pass this up. So they ended up writing the script for Tim Burton, thinking the budget was much, much higher than it was, and that there would be a much more professional and experienced director at the helm. They kept the script exactly as it was, with a budget chopped, and with Adam Resnick, who had never directed anything in his life, including the Get a Life episodes. They wrote them, but they neither of them had any directing experience. So it was a little bit of a bad recipe. Ed Wood ended up coming out the same year as Cabin Boy, and it actually shares a couple of cast members.
There's at least one notable one. We'll get to I'm very curious because I can't off the top of my head think of any more than one though.
Yeah.
The suspense is killing me as to who those.
I'll tell you later. We'll keep it
cast
in
members are
suspense.
going to be. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. According to Adam Resnick, this is a quote. As far as filming this thing, there was not one good day. It was a nightmare. They had actually written it, very specifically with Tim Burton in mind. So they actually added all of those creatures that you see in this movie, and the special effects for Tim Burton. They actually have said they would not have put that stuff in if it wasn't for the fact that they thought Tim Burton would want that stuff. They actually base this film on the 1937 film Captain's Courageous. That was a huge hit in 1937. Spencer Tracy is in it. He got an Oscar for his role as Manuel, who is the hero of the movie. He plays a Portuguese man, but nobody bothered to give him any dialect coaching. He also curled his hair. He sounds and looks like Chico Marx, but he won an Oscar for this.
Say, that's best kind songs. When you feel good inside, like trade wind, she just come out. Oh, my beautiful lady.
It has Frederick Bartholomew as the kid, and he's amazing. And then Lionel Barrymore in basically what is his last standing role, I believe. It's the kind of movie that's really fun. The first half of it, it really is a fun adventure movie. It's this spoiled, rotten rich kid who ends up on a ship with all these tough as nails seafaring men. But then, towards the end of the movie, your heart gets torn from your breast and thrown onto the floor and ground into the carpet by the movie.
Based on the film in the way that, say, Airplane is based on 0 Hour, is it a straight up remake with comedy?
It follows the beginning of it. It follows the beginning. It's spoiled brat kid. The kid in Captain's Courageous is 10. This is a story based on a Rudyard Kipling novel. And in the book, he's 15. And so it's sort of funny because in the book, he's 15. In the movie, he's 10. And in Cabin Boy, he's like 30 something.
35.
So it's actually a great movie. Again, the spoiled brat child, he's a really horrible kid, and he's dishonest, and he's just a total brat, and he cheats his way through school. He ggets thrown in amongst these sailors, and keeps telling them, I have all this money. If you just bring me back to shore, I'll give you literally $10,000 in 1937 money to bring me back to my father. We're like, yeah, right, kid. He learns to fish, and then he just never wants to go back to his old life.
I only have two questions, though. How many captains and how courageous are they?
One, and he's actually not very courageous. Yeah, but
it's a lie in both words in the title are a lie.
It's a really strange title. Anyway, so everybody
does it have an apostrophe? Is it have
no apostrophe?
The Captain's Courageous.
Completely confusing title.
It's like an answer to a question. Who's courageous? Captain's Courageous.
It's actually famous for being very accurate nautically, like as far as the sailing and the fishing and the gutting of the fish. It's kind of cool that way. Anyway,
I felt that about Cabin Boy.
Yeah, exactly. Well. Now, the other thing that this movie, Cabin Boy, is based on is one episode of Get a Life, which is the episode in which a construction crew comes into their home to rebuild their kitchen. And Chris's character just is so impressed with them. He thinks they're the greatest thing ever, and just tries to, ingratiate himself into their little circle of construction worker people. Do you remember that episode?
Yes, I do.
And in fact, the person who plays the captain in Cabin Boy is
Rich Brinkley.
Rich Brinkley. He's a hard name to remember.
The late Rich Brinkley.
Yeah, he was one of the construction workers. He's perfect in both roles. And that's kind of what they were going for, again, with Cabin Boy. That was kind of the concept, was Chris's usual character, the character he kind of always plays, being thrown into a group of real tough guy, bad boy, kind of real manly men. And the contrast, that goes with that. He would just clash with. Yeah.
This spoiled cream puff who is arrogant for no reason at all.
Yes.
And I think that's the best description of him. That's what the New York Times reviewer said about his character. It's the opposite of, say, like Woody Allen, where he presents himself as a nebbish, but you're supposed to love him. And here Chris Elliott presents himself as a nebbish who but he doesn't expect you to love him.
No.
You're not expected to love him. And it's a little more honest, I think.
Yeah, no, he, that's, I think, what bothers a lot of people is he really shoves the unappealingness of himself, way up front. Now, I do want to read some of the reviews just before we move on and talk a little bit more about the film. Reviews when this came out. Washington Post said, Cabin Boy, which opened here yesterday, contains about enough laugh out loud, sight gags, and non sequiturs to justify what it demands of a viewer's time and money. But I am laughing right now as I recall it. So this is one of the only good reviews it got, was the Washington Post. So God bless the Washington Post. I subscribe. This is, for that alone, you should subscribe to the Washington Post.
I do subscribe.
These are all reviews from 1994. Variety. Obnoxious, snide, and pointless. This ill-fated spoof carries the bonus of being as crude and gamey as the hold of an old fishing barge. Still, that aroma probably won't linger as this fish figures to sail out of theaters quickly.
Well, that is bullshit, because in panning the movie, they're lifting the word gamey right out of the movie, which is used a number of times. Yep. So clearly that person went home from the movie and retained some bit of it.
He's probably still making little Cabin Boy jokes.
Yeah, dining out on his use of the word gamey from Cabin Boy.
Ripped it off. Wholesale.
The movie he panned, he or she. I don't know that reviewer's name.
New York Times. Bizarre without being funny. There is a limit to how much charm and how many laughs Chris Elliott can wring out of deadpan idiocy. What's comic in a skit becomes labored over 81 minutes. Not skit, sketch. Not skit, sketch.
Anyone who uses the word skit is automatically dead to me.
Okay, so Entertainment Weekly. Elliott wears his loathsomeness like a cardboard crown. Few comedies have worked this hard to make everyone on screen look dumb. D+.
That's a good review to me. That exactly describes the movie. But for some reason, they think that's all a negative thing. I don't understand it. Entertainment Weekly, Weakly.
Well, what's funny is Adam Resnick has said that when he did the test screening, when the movie was first completed, first of all, the place just cleared out. People were leaving in droves. But he overheard like one person saying as they were walking out, that movie was so cheesy.
It comes off as intentional, but
no, to me, that's the entire point, is to be cheesy. That's what's funny about this movie, is the cheesiness. That's what it is. That's what you're supposed to be laughing at. So it's very, it's kind of a funny, strange comment clearly they did not understand what they were seeing. So just a quick synopsis of this movie. This is a movie about a young man born into wealth who he's just graduating a school. As you graduate, you are deemed a fancy lad. That's what you graduate to be. That's what the school makes you into being, what they call a fancy lad.
Fancy lad is a name, and it's not a nickname. It's what the school themselves calls their
graduates.
Cadets, their
you
graduates.
Get a card, yeah.
Fancy lads.
You graduate to be a fancy lad, yeah.
If you went to this particular finishing school or prep school or whatever it is, it's like calling someone a Yalie or something like that. Or whatever,
you can now put that on your resume. You're a fancy lad. As he graduates and pisses everybody off because he's such a jerk, he's a snob, and his father is going to whisk him off on a boat, on a grand boat. I guess
it's a liner. It's like a luxury liner.
Right, luxury liner to Hawaii, where his father has a chain of hotels, and Chris's character is to take over the hotel chain. So off he goes. The limo driver who's driving him away gets sick of him and kicks him out.
Welcome to the real world, kid.
I want to mention that limo driver because he seems to be right out of an episode of The Sopranos, and he's driving a limo, even though ostensibly this takes place in the 18th century.
Right, that's one of the
one of my favorite things about this movie is that they sort of set up that this is the 18th century and people wearing powdered wigs and stuff, and yet it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. There's microwave ovens, there's a limo.
Well, they did that for Tim Burton. They did that because even Edward Scissorhands is kind of like that, right? Edward Scissorhands has kind of a 50s feel, but then you walk into someone's house and you see something modern. Or Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Obviously, that too is just this weird, timeless, like, you know, again, you're sort of in the 50s, but you're not. And they sort of felt like that was a Tim Burton vibe that they wanted to maintain, you know?
Yeah, and you sort of forget about it. You sort of forget about it through the movie because they're on the open seas, you know. And then at the end of the movie, when it comes back to dry land and you see Chris Elliott's reunited with his father, and his father has this sort of powdered wig sort of thing.
I like the timelessness of it. I think it actually works really well. They actually regretted the wig. They've said on record several times they regretted the wig, his little affected accent that he takes on. They thought that kind of ruined. I think that was one. I think
part of it. That's all part of it.
I can't. Yeah, for some reason they both say we wish they hadn't done that. I think they're essential. I think they're so great. Anyway,
I love that when you see Chris at the prep school at the very beginning. There's sort of like another director would have gone with the gag of these are all 10-year-old boys, and then there's 35-year-old Chris Elliott with a beard in the middle of it. But this movie is weirder than that because all of the boys in the prep school are 35-year-old men.
Yes.
And some of them have beards. Chris is even the only one with a full beard.
Yeah. And so they're like, and we're not going to go through this movie step by step, but just so you know, like there's, of course, when he's in the classroom, Alfred Molina is
Alfred Molina, uncredited,
teacher,
plays
uncredited,
a teacher,
but they're learning how to tip their derby. That's the entire lesson.
Right.
And there's like 8 steps written on the blackboard how to tip your derby properly. So in any case, we're skipping one great little scene that we'll get back to, but he ends up getting lost, going on and getting on the wrong ship. He gets on a fisherman's boat, goes down below deck to take a nap before he even knows what's going on. He thinks it's a fantasy cruise where they're pretending like to rough it.
Oh, I see. This is the Queen Catherine. It's one of those theme ships, isn't it? Yes, I've read about these things, where we passengers pretend we're common types and slum it up a bit.
But instead, it in fact is a fishing boat. He wakes up and he's off in the middle of the ocean with these very, very rough sailors. 4 of them.
Old salts.
Yeah. Plus Andy Richter, who plays the cabin boy that they have already
Briefly.
at hand.
It's a cameo from Andy Richter, really.
So they go off. Of course, Chris's character gets them completely off track, and they run into crazy monsters. It's very Harryhausen.
It's got a Sinbad in the Seventh Voyage kind of vibe to it at times.
Right. Yeah. There's some really cool stop motion animation and giants and, all kinds of crazy stuff. Everybody in it is great. They all say that the only thing that was great about
cast members.
The only thing that was great about filming it was all the actors were great. They loved working with all of these actors. Everybody nails it. Everybody's great. I think a good way to sort of just go through this is to go through the characters, because it's the kind of movie where part of the charm is you're just meeting these new characters all along the way. It's an adventure story. So each person you meet along the way kind of is a new little tableau, and it's kind of a fun way to go through the movie. So Chris Elliott plays Nathaniel Mayweather. I keep forgetting actually that his name is Nathaniel. Like I find it hard to remember that for some reason. Nathaniel Mayweather.
And the perfect name. You hear that name and you just want to smack him in the face.
Yep. And so he, of course, again, it was at the sporting school. The wonderful headmaster Timmons is I.M. Hobson, who I don't really know much about, but he's fabulous.
Good riddance, you horrible, dreadful, nasty little bastard.
So you can tell he's a nice guy. He's just like, this Nathaniel Mayweather is such a little
He's
prick.
a nice guy, but when he tries to discipline Nathaniel calls him Reichmaster, which is so funny.
As a fancy lad, respecting those around you is both your duty and your obligation.
I'm sorry, sir. I was just pondering what drifter's corpse you stole those shoes from.
The school also was the Lebowski mansion in The Big Lebowski. And also appeared in the movie Stripes, starring Bill Murray, whose brother, Brian Doyle Murray, is in this film.
There you go. Did not know that. The big beginning scene that everybody, even every reviewer who reviewed this movie was like, but the one scene that was really good was David Letterman. And he does a cameo in this that really is outstanding. You got to say.
I love it. I love it. And I rewind it and watch it at least 3 times every time.
Well, what's on your mind, little girl?
I realize that you are most likely the product of lower-class inbreeding, but perhaps you could help me.
Oh, gosh, I certainly hope so.
Yeah. Hey, listen, have a good trip, Susie. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Think about me, all right? Oh, man, do I hate them fancy lads.
Letterman appears selling sock monkeys.
Yeah.
And he does say, would you like to buy a monkey?
Yes. And he's a notary public. You see that on his building.
I missed that.
He's in a bomb. He's in a bomb shelter. His little shop is a bomb shelter, and he's notary public. And now again, it's mean matter. It's mean Letterman. Now the humor is, him calling him a girl, which of course is the ultimate insult.
You remind me of my niece Sally.
Hey, wait a minute, Jennifer, come here. Big girls have big appetites, don't they? Have a good trip, Susie.
Being a girl is the ultimate insult, right? I always found Letterman very sexist.
Yeah.
I always adored David Letterman. I loved David Letterman. He was one of my heroes. But even as a kid, so 82, I was in middle school, I think, I could see the sexism. I could see how he treated female guests.
But wait. Yeah. But if I can defend that.
Okay.
For a moment.
Good. Give it a try.
Okay. Jennifer, Susie, or a little girl. None of that's insulting if you say it to Jennifer, Susie, or a girl. It's only insulting if you say it to a 35-year-old man. It's context. It's all about context.
It's you throw like a girl. It's the implication that female is negative. I'm sorry.
But it's okay. But it's also consistent with his character in the film.
It is. That I give you. You. That's what he would have said. That's what that character. That's what that character would have said. Absolutely.
Of the old,
But it's also Letterman. It's also David Letterman. And it is, of course, the time.
But Chris Elliott insults him back.
Insults him because being called a girl is such an insult. Yes.
It is in the film.
Listen, Joe. I grew up as a girl. And I remember those insults. And I don't know if it's easy for men to understand that for being female to be an insult, just a straight up insult, is not a great way to grow up. And that's just a fact.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I know what you're thinking, and I know, but you're wrong. It shouldn't be an insult.
No, I was
anyway.
Listen, Susie.
I admit it's funny. It's funny because it's Letterman, and in his delivery, he nails it. It's funny. Perfect. Even being insulted, it's still funny. I find it funny.
Yeah.
But
there was an episode of Get a Life. I don't know if you remember this one where Jackie Earle Haley played Chris Elliott's cousin, his cousin Donald. And his cousin Donald is like the golden boy of the family who everyone adores. And so Chris Elliott has constantly been in the shadow of his cousin Donald. And he hates his cousin Donald so much. And at some point he gets so frustrated with Donald, he says, "I hate Donald. He's a girl." That's his insult for Donald. It's just
exactly. That was standard. It was standard.
So funny because he's this overgrown child. He's supposed to be like
you're a boy. It's funny because you're a boy.
But he's like a 9-year-old boy in the body of a 35-year-old man.
And you didn't have to hear that stuff growing up.
But it's so funny in the context of that episode because the fact that Chris Elliott, the fact that his character, the worst thing he can say about Donald is simply he's a girl, unqualified. Just he's a girl.
Joe
is so funny.
It's not funny. It's not funny.
That episode is funny.
I disagree. So anyway,
girl.
We're gonna have to do a Patreon episode on this kind of humor because I like discussing.
Find that clip and you're gonna play it right here, and everyone who's listening is gonna laugh.
Except for the females.
I hate you, Donald. I hate you. You're a girl. You're ugly. You're a girl.
Okay. David Letterman is not uncredited in this film,
right?
But he is credited as Earl Hoffert.
Yes. Do you know any idea what that is?
That is the same fake name he used to be credited for his voice role in Beavis and Butthead Do America.
Ah, there you go.
So Earl Hoffert has 2 credits under his belt.
Yeah.
In fact.
But in any case, he just nails he nails it. And it's funny because it's him. And it's funny because he was in another life. That's who he was. He would have been a guy in a shack on the sea.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You know, that's who David Letterman would have been if he hadn't been born in Indiana.
Yeah. And maybe all of these guys' comedy is them exorcising the person they didn't want to be, or that they're afraid of being, you know, because I mean, in Chris
he would have
Elliott's
been happy being that. He would have been perfectly happy being that.
But Chris Elliott's other life, he could have been as the privileged son of a famous father, and he could have been exactly like his characters. So I think in some ways he's being very self-deprecating by always portraying this character. It's kind of like trying to exercise this other person that he doesn't want to be.
Yeah, he grew up on the Upper East Side. You know, he had no want of anything in his life as a kid.
And again, he's the son of a famous father.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what led up to this movie. Chris Elliott, he was there from the day one of the Late Show, 1982. When David Letterman launched into late night television
39 years ago.
Yeah. Chris Elliott was a production assistant when he started. He was actually kind of like a wrangler for those stupid pet tricks. And then he quickly, you know, just made a name for himself and made his way through and became a writer and, of course, a performer after a while.
Everyone working there was aware that his father was Bob Elliott.
Letterman loved that stuff. He loved the old time radio personalities and the old black and white TV personalities. He loved that stuff. So there's no question that he was like, oh, you're Bob Elliott's son.
Even if you don't include the Chris Elliott bits that were done, the entire sort of early Letterman show and that kind of humor was very much inspired by Bob and Ray. It had all of that same kind of comedy tonality to it. You know, the idea of just having Calvert DeForest stand there and giving him the name Larry Bud Melman and having him advertise toast on a stick is very, very Bob and Ray. You know, that Bob and Ray used to do a bit of having a fast food restaurant called the House of Toast.
Say, if you're driving in the country this weekend and get hungry, look for a Bob and Ray House of Toast.
You'll find convenient, friendly Bob and Ray houses of toast located all over the tri-state area.
All kinds of toast: white, whole wheat, rye, pumpernickel, and toasted, light, medium, or heavy, and buttered to suit you on the near or far side.
If you like toast, but hate to feel the bread between your fingers, then how about a snack that's easy and quick? Mr. Larry's Toast on a Stick. You won't hate the taste because it's flavor-free.
Let me just introduce this properly. So let's go back to Chris Elliott's history. So Chris Elliott was the son of Bob Elliott of the famous comedy duo Bob and Ray. Bob and Ray were first known as radio stars. So this is back in the 1940s. So it's Bob Elliott, Ray Goulding. They both were working at the same Boston radio station doing separate shows. And little by little, they would visit each other's shows and get on mic. And people just loved the two of them bouncing off of each other. And then they started asking them to fill in for like baseball coverage because they were so entertaining. So they would actually cover an entire baseball game and the audience just ate it up. So they were eventually given their own show and it was wildly successful in Boston. I mean, everybody just adored it. It was huge. And it was during that time that they came up with this entire universe of their own. And I think that might be what was groundbreaking about them too, was coming up with their own imaginary universe of characters and
recurring bits
like
Wally Ballou.
Wally Ballou was a newscaster.
Lee Ballou, speaking from the general offices of the Uncomfortable Air Conditioning Company in Berwyn, Illinois. I'm talking with Mr. Marvin Leppert, the president of the firm. As I understand it, Mr. Leppert, your company deliberately makes air conditioners that create a good deal of discomfort. I'd say it's about 15 above in here, and the wind is blowing in off the air conditioner at a good 30 to 35 miles an hour.
The best part is that there's absolutely no regulator of any kind on the machine, and the only way to turn it off is to chop it to pieces with an axe.
They would do parodies of soap operas. They would have, female characters. They would play the female characters. They'd play the kid characters. They'd play all the characters.
Mostly Ray, who was the big one with the deep voice, would play all the female characters oddly. That for some reason was the way they always did it. And Bob Elliott, who had this kind of like voice like this, Lee Ballou here, he never played a female character, almost ever.
Yeah.
Strangely.
Yeah. And you know, they had a little band, and they would like interact with the band, and you know, it was very irreverent, you know. So there was a lot of improvising, a lot of making fun of the band or making fun of whoever was around them, and making fun of each other. But then again, this universe that they had of recurring, they'd have these products, like we were saying at the beginning of the show, like that was a Bob and Ray product that they would advertise.
Monongahela Metal Foundry and Einbinder Flypaper. That was a recurring commercial that they would do.
Always ask for genuine Einbinder flypaper, the brand you've gradually grown to trust over the course of 3 generations.
And it's so, you know, it's just the wording of that. And it reminds me of when we were doing Bedazzled, when they had like the eye wash company, what is
Fruity
the
Green Eye Wash, yeah.
It's really similar, but this was...
Well, they had a great ear for place names. And it's a thing that I think is also recurs often in British humor, where they'll mention some little town outside of London, and just from the name of it, people will laugh.
I wonder if they were really the first ones to kind of come up with these fake products. Like that was really, you know, that was really funny. I mean, you can imagine how funny that was back then. We're a little more used to that now. You know, especially Saturday Night Live would do it. But, you know, it seems like when you think about the comedy that came before that, I can't really think of anyone else who was doing something like that.
Yeah. And they kind of, and later on, they developed a cult following with a lot of young people, and eventually married that comedy with Saturday Night Live.
So after the radio shows, they ended up with a television show. Audrey Meadows got her start there, the incredible Audrey Meadows.
That's right.
And then when Audrey Meadows left to join Jackie Gleason on his show,
that windbag.
Cloris Leachman
That
then
was his
came
nickname.
in.
Not the great one. That was his real nickname.
Cloris
that
Leachman.
Drunken windbag.
Cloris Leachman then was the person who took Audrey Meadows' place. A pretty amazing track record for picking female stars. Again, lots of parodies, a lot of stuff pulled from their radio show, you know, again, fake soap operas, fake television shows. They continued to work their entire careers. In the 70s, you would see them appear on Saturday Night Live. They did a special with all the women of Saturday Night Live, Gilda Radner, Lorraine Newman.
Bob and Ray with Jane, Lorraine, and Gilda. And it's one of my favorite things ever.
Don't you just know exactly what they're thinking?
If you want my body.
Yeah, it's amazing. And they did specials for PBS. Of course, they did the talk shows. They did El Sullivan, Johnny Carson, and eventually
they sold out
Letterman.
Carnegie Hall.
They sold out Carnegie Hall, Broadway shows, and shows. So they did not stop working.
Yeah, they even appeared in some films. In fact, if you ever saw the film Cold Turkey, the Dick Van Dyke film about an entire town that quit smoking at once, they're in that. They're in the Al Pacino movie from the 80s, Author, and they play Al Pacino's agents, and they're credited as Bob and Ray. They would appear together and be credited as Bob and Ray. They're also in a very, very strange adaptation of a Kurt Vonnegut short story.
Yes.
That ran on PBS. God, I forget what it was called, but it starred William Hickey.
It's called
as an astronaut who's a poet who becomes an astronaut.
It's called Between Time and Timbuktu, a space fantasy.
Between Time and Timbuktu, right?
It's really interesting. It's really something, and it's on. You can find it on YouTube. It's very.
Yeah, they appear as newscasters.
Yeah, Kurt Vonnegut was a big fan of theirs, actually.
He was a big fan of theirs, and they some of their collected sketches were put into several books, and he wrote an introduction to one of those books.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, and of course, Bob Elliott appeared in Chris's projects, like Cabin Boy. He plays his father in Cabin Boy. He plays his father in Get a Life. So a couple other little projects, which we'll get to. So that's the background as far as where Chris was coming from. He was coming from this very groundbreaking humor that you can kind of see a little bit of a continuity into it. So Letterman. Joe and I are lucky enough to be of the age where we remember when Letterman hit the airwaves in 82.
I sure do.
It was, to me, more significant than Saturday Night Live as far as like wiring my brain for humor.
So I think at that point in the 80s, there really wasn't comedy like that.
Yeah,
at all. Was not. And there wasn't really even a focus in comedy on on sarcasm at that time. That was kind of a new concept that David Letterman was introducing at the time. That your comedy could just be about just saying the opposite of something in a snide kind of way.
Yeah.
It
was anti-Hollywood. It was completely anti-Hollywood. It was completely cynical beyond, dripping with cynicism. It was kind of mean.
Yeah, very cynical.
It was like Johnny Carson was mostly, warm and fuzzy. There was always a mean edge to a lot of these people. There's a mean edge to Jack Benny, right? There's a mean edge to a lot of these comedians, famous comedians. I mean, obviously Don Rickles and a lot of the Milton Berle. There was a mean edge, but Letterman, I don't know, he really took it to another level.
He really did. But I remember thinking, I was in high school at the time, and I was very unhappy and kind of lonely. Really didn't have any friends in high school. And that early Letterman show, when I found Late Night, it meant so much to me because it felt like this is where I live now.
Yeah.
This 12:30 to 1:30 a.m. every night is where people get me. Those are my people on that screen.
Yeah.
And that's who gets me. And I watched it every night religiously. And when I was supposed to be asleep, I would sneak a small TV into my bedroom to watch it under the covers with the volume down. Because I needed to watch it because it was the only good thing of that day happening that day for me sometimes. And when Chris Elliott first appeared doing a character, maybe I think it was the guy under the stairs character or something like that, as soon as he appeared, it was immediate. I didn't need to warm up to him. I was like, oh, that's a funny guy. And I just can't wait for his next appearance.
But he really did marry like his father's humor and Letterman. I mean, he absolutely learned from day one from Letterman. His Letterman was imprinted on him from the get-go, even though he was there from day one, with Letterman. So Letterman, I'll just say, I never found Johnny Carson funny. Again, to me, it was the same thing where this was suddenly, it all made sense. My entire family would watch Letterman and we would all be laughing, all of us, all four of us. And so I do have that memory of like my entire family being like crying, laughing. And this was so different. So he would take, watermelons and throw them off the roofs of buildings. He would visit stores in, little shops in Manhattan and, kind of harass the
Those were my favorite. Was
dealers.
Just walking around like New York and doing these remote segments and
I don't know why people don't do this anymore.
Signs, like one of the bits, I think Merrill Marco came up with this bit of going to all the various coffee shops and delis that had a sign in front that said world's best coffee and investigating seriously whether or not their coffee was in fact the world's best coffee.
Yeah.
And they discovered that in most cases it was not.
I mean, Letterman opened the first episode with Larry Bud Melman. And so if you don't know who that is, you got to look that up on YouTube.
Yeah, you have to.
It's just like this character out of nowhere. You never, ever saw anything like Larry Bud Melman.
There's a clear continuity from Bob and Ray to that character. The idea of presenting this kind of button-down, schlubby kind of a guy who's wearing these horn-rimmed glasses and can't really speak, is not made for big time show business at all.
Just the
and putting
last
him on
person...
network TV to represent what real life is really all about, which is generally boring people.
What his character was, the last person who should have been on television is what his character was. The person who most should not.
And when you say it's anti-Hollywood, it's true, because that kind of to go on network television on doing a show and then putting someone who's kind of nebbishy and schlumpy and boring front and center, it's almost punk.
It is. So this was 82, so it was right after punk. And it is, I think that is like what was in the air.
In the early days, that show was something that the network NBC mostly didn't care about. And they stuck it at 12:30 to 1:30, and they thought because it's at 12:30 to 1:30, no one's going to watch it, so it doesn't really matter. So they don't have much of a budget. So they really didn't have a lot of money, and it's a very shaggy, homemade looking show.
Yeah,
it has a very putting on a show in a garage kind of aesthetic to it.
You would hear Barbara Gaines yelling out from her office at Letterman. He'd be like, Barbara, am I supposed to do this? And she'd be like, yeah, just do it.
It's Barbara Gaines' birthday. Happy birthday, Barbara. How old are you? Okay.
It was that kind of thing. Yeah.
And it looks very homemade, and it looks kind of messy and kind of unpolished and kind of shaggy.
You'd see Biff Henderson walking on. You'd see what was the name of the guy who did the he literally did the physical plant stuff, and he was one of the main characters.
Our stagehands, Pat Farmer and Kenny Sheehan, they read the Oprah Winfrey transcripts. Here we go, boys. Take it away. Pat and Kenny read the Oprah Winfrey Show.
I believe I will run on, see what the end will be. Our hearts are open wide, got a new light shining inside. Pat and Kenny read Oprah transcripts.
And they were just people who were working there, and Dave just wrangled them in, and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
So Chris Elliott started coming on doing these little bits, and they just immediately clicked. He would have these running characters, and I had actually forgotten. I hadn't watched these in a long time. Wonderful people on YouTube have gathered all of these bits together. So it was like every single Guy Under the Stairs sketch.
You can find compilations of all of them on YouTube
and put them together, in like an hour and a half on. And so I had forgotten how meta the Guy Under the Stairs was. I forgot that the entire from the first episode, they were like stepping away, like he'd do the character, and then immediately David Letterman would be like, that was Chris Elliott doing episode 1 of Guy Under the Stairs. Chris, come out and take a bow. Like I had completely
he would do this very theatrical kind of bow,
and he was
like he was a theater kid,
and like every time Letterman would reintroduce him, it was as if it was the first time.
And there he is now. Chris, come on out and take a bow. Chris Elliott, and there's Chris. Now, Chris, come on up and take a bow, won't you? Right now, Chris, come on up and take a bow, Chris. Starring our own Chris Elliott. There he is now. Chris, come on up here and take a bow. Way to go, Chris. Yeah.
And so there was always this meta humor. There was always this stepping away, like we're doing this dumb character. We know it's a dumb character,
right,
and we're going to point out to you that it's a dumb character, and that this is Chris Elliott doing a dumm character. And
it's a frame within a frame within a frame.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So
then all of his characters had the word guy. There was the fugitive guy, which was sort of a again like a meta parody of the show The Fugitive, where they would meet Chris and he would be supposedly a drifter who now is working in the studio, and then suddenly the one-armed man would find him, it's the one-legged man, and would find him, and then he'd have to run away, and for some reason there'd always be a guy standing in the way who he'd have to punch to get out of the way. It would always be the same exact guy too, and that would be it, and it would be the same bit every single time.
Right. Or he would do a straight impersonation of somebody. Like he would do an impersonation. Obviously, he did an impersonation of Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando was an ongoing one, and he would come out and he would always do the banana dance, where he would spread bananas on the floor of the studio stage, and then as Marlon Brando, the band would play the Alley Cat, and he would dance around the bananas very badly,
right.
and you were supposed to, I guess, applaud for that.
And that Alley Cat ended up in Cabin Boy, of course. It also ended up in Get a Life.
On you, go ahead, Ringo, hit it. Here we go. All right, there we go. Bananas.
What did I tell you? Is he pathetic or what?
He did Marv Albert,
the sportscaster.
And what's so great is what he would do is the first time he'd come out, he would barely be doing an impersonation. I mean, just barely. It would be almost his voice and him just like running through the lines, maybe with a bad wig on. And then every consecutive time that he'd come out, he'd get a little more into character until by the end of it, he was actually nailing these characters.
Yeah.
He did Morton Downey Jr. It's one of my favorite things that he did, where again, it just starts out with him doing a very rough, not very good Morton Downey Jr., who is this, for those who don't know, he was like the original Jerry Springer. He was the very, very first Jerry Springer. So anyway, so Chris would do him. And by the end of it, I mean, he looked like him. He sounded exactly like it. He would nail that impersonation, actually.
Chris Elliott Jr. Show.
stupidest trick I've ever seen, baby. Take your dog and get back to Russia.
Let me sum up. Fashion in the 80s. You know, we've heard from both sides tonight. Well, here's what I think. Let's take the minis and the itsy bitsies and the pastel-colored halter tops and let the pablum puking material girls wear bikini undershorts in Red Square. Good night.
There's one where he does Jay Leno, and it's wonderful. I love it because he's introduced as Chris Elliott, and then for some reason comes out dressed as Jay Leno and made up to look like Jay Leno with an outrageous cartoonish prosthetic chin, and a wig, and even like a rubber appliance covering up his mustache on his face, and sits down and starts basically doing Jay Leno.
It's these 24-hour banking machines. Now, have we seen these? Now, I'm all for progress. I'm all for progress. But, I mean, honey, it's 4 a.m. in the morning. Time to go to sleep. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I have to go down to the bank and make sure the check for the dry cleaner is clear.
And doing his voice and doing his bits. And at one point, Dave Letterman says, you know, Chris, I notice you look and sound exactly like Jay Leno.
See, that wasn't really quite on the money because Jay's voice is more of a baritone. It's more of a booming kind of voice, you know.
Dave, I'm not doing Jay Leno.
And then continues to deny it throughout the entire thing.
Chris and even Adam refer to that period as the best years of their lives and the most, you know, I think they believe that's also their best creative output was those years. Yeah. So, and I agree with that. I do. I think that stuff was just brilliant. So Cabin Boy, continuing the story. So then we meet Andy Richter, who is so good in this. This was right. He had just started doing Conan. Just started.
Yeah, it was very, very
So most
early.
people didn't really know who he was. I knew who he was. You want to know why I knew who he was?
I'm going to guess it's from the Real Life Brady Bunch.
Yep. He did the real life.
I knew it.
He did the Real Life Brady Bunch at the Village Gate in New York City. And I went to see that. Jane Lynch was also in it. They did 3 episodes of the Brady Bunch. This was a show where they would just run through the script straight. They would read
Brady Bunch script and just do it verbatim.
And I can't explain why
on stage,
but it was the funniest thing you ever saw. It was so funny.
They didn't add jokes or anything. It was just all in the performance of the meta sort of
just in the performance
vibe of it.
And just because nobody had ever done it. And again, it was sort of just so groundbreaking in a similar way, you know, to that at that time, you just never saw anything like that before. And
it led to a lot of people doing the same thing with other sitcoms.
And the Brady Bunch for us of our generation was just, we had it drilled into our brain. We would watch the Brady Bunch every single day after school. I did, at least. Yeah. And even though you hated it, even though you knew it was the worst, stupidest, most idiotic show, and you felt sorry for those kids on the Brady Bunch, and you were like, I never want to I would never want anyone to know I'm watching the Brady Bunch, but you watch it every day anyway, as you ate your Ritz crackers and aerosol spray cheese, you were watching the Brady Bunch and you knew every word of every episode of the Brady Bunch. So on the day I went, the guest was Davy fucking Jones, who performed
as himself,
who performed the song. My first crush when I was in kindergarten and first grade was Davy Jones. I was crying. I was literally crying. I was sobbing. I was laughing and sobbing. It was one of the greatest days of my entire life.
I'm so happy for you.
That's how I knew Andy Richter. So, but in any case, Andy Richter in this role, like, he's slow. He's clearly slow. It's the sweetest, it's
Captain
very.
says he's dumb as a carp.
Captain says I'm dumb as a carp.
And this character is so beautiful. It's like this sweet. You love this character. You feel so bad for him.
I also like that they kill him.
They kill him off right off the bat.
But I have a problem with this part of the film because I love Andy Richter. Andy Richter is a wonderful guy, but this place where he appears in the film, I sort of tune out a little bit.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
I
have
love
a hard
it.
time with this place in the film.
I love it. Really?
I think it's for a number of reasons, because you're in right around the first 10 minutes of the film. It's it moves along real fast. So, the inciting incident is Letterman directs him to the wrong boat deliberately, and then he gets on the wrong boat, and that's only about 10 minutes in the film, and that pretty much starts the movie. And up to that point, you've seen the whole thing take place in locations, and then it immediately cuts to Andy Richter, and then suddenly we're on an obvious soundstage.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the beginning.
Jarring.
That's the beginning of the movie looking really fake. Yeah, it's the beginning of
and everything after that is a soundstage. The whole movie after
and you're
that
just
is a
stuck on that
soundstage.
boat. You're just stuck on that.
Yeah, and I think that's where
boat. Yeah,
that's where a lot of audiences probably checked out and said, "Whoa, wait, what's going on here? I don't like this." It's probably where a lot of people turn it off or walk out of the theater.
Yeah.
And also the fact that you're now being introduced to Andy Richter as this very sweet, nice guy who Chris is kind of snowing. He's kind of abusing this sweet guy. And I don't really want that at that point in the movie. What I want is to get right to the crew of the ship and have Chris meet these grizzled old sailors who
really?
get the better
No,
of him.
I disagree. I love it. I love the contrast. I love the contrast of this sweet, dumb, but heart of gold guy who's just, he works so hard as a cabin boy. He just does what he's told, and even the way he dies, he's just like, okay, I'm gonna die. That's it. Tell the captain.
No, he's very happy about it.
He's not happy about it. He's not happy about it. He's just accepting.
Way
it,
too chipper about it.
No, he's like, when you went off on these boats, people would not come back. I mean, that was just accepted. You knew a certain amount of people. You'd learn that if you'd watch Captain's Courageous.
Okay.
And
I guess I have a lot to learn then about the seafaring ways.
The ending is all about honoring every single season the people who don't come back. So he just accepted that he's like, oh well, I was tossed overboard. I'm the next person to die on one of these expeditions. So I love it.
To me, the movie really starts when those 4 crew members we'll get to how beautifully cast they all are.
I wouldn't have minded Andy Richter there till the end. I really wouldn't have. So anyway, we totally disagree on that. That's okay. So let's introduce the other characters. So we meet the captain, who is again in an episode of Get a Life. He really isn't a well-known actor. Rich Brinkley.
You might say I dropped out of my mama's womb with galoshes on my feet and a fishing rod in my hand.
Ouch, that poor woman.
Passed away.
Yeah, they've all passed away. Everybody
all except Brian Doyle Murray. They're all dead. All 3 of them.
Yeah. So he's the big guy, Captain, and he's wonderful in this. He's perfect. He's just absolutely pitch perfect.
He's great, and he's sort of the sweetest of the 4. You kind of like him the most.
And then we have James Gammon, who's Paps, and he's the one with the really rough voice.
Hey, you want to learn a little fisherman's Greek? Kadinga, pachinga, kastinga.
My note on Paps is this is the greatest role Tom Waits never played.
Yeah, he has the Tom Waits voice.
Yeah.
It's
I could
perfect.
easily see Tom Waits in that role if Tom Waits would lower himself to such a project.
But he has a better look. He has a much better look than Tom Waits. He is just the epitome. You could not have cast a better guy for Paps.
Yeah, he's great.
He's just wonderful. And then Brian Doyle Murray, of course, as
Brian Doyle
Skunk.
Murray, I love.
Kid, we're just here to catch fish and stink. Mostly the latter.
He also was on Get a Life.
Became very prominent in the 2nd season of Get a Life because Bob Elliott really didn't want to do the show anymore. So they brought in Brian Doyle Murray as a foil for Chris for the 2nd season.
He's got the rough voice too. He's perfect.
Well, Brian Doyle Murray has one of the greatest voices ever, and I could listen to it on a loop tape. That's my ASMR, is Brian Doyle Murray's voice.
Yeah.
And I seriously would love to start a series of audiobooks of the great works of literature read by Brian Doyle Murray. And I think that would be incredibly successful.
And then rounding out the crew is Breon James as Big Teddy.
Great. I always called him Brian James. I don't know. Is that really the
I
pronunciation?
don't know. I always thought it was Breon, but I don't know.
I think it was just Brian with an O.
Okay.
These socks I'm wearing are pure wool, and they've been on my feet for 3 straight weeks. And if you don't blow, you're going to swallow them like an aspirin.
Yeah. Brian James, best known as Leon from Blade Runner.
Yeah, he's the first guy pretty much that you meet in Blade Runner.
Taking the Voight-Comp test at the beginning and says, I'll tell you about my mother, I know what a turtle is. I love Brian James. He's in so many things where he always plays like a sleazy sort of a henchman, but he's a really good actor. And when he would break out and play like a comedy role or something like that, he was always great. He's in a really little scene Sam Raimi film called Crime Wave. Where him and Paul Bluto Smith are a team, and they're like a team of robbers. It's a great pairing.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just the perfect villain. He's the perfect, and again here.
Yeah, and he's so good in this movie. He has so many great moments where some great lines, like those flounders are bloodthirsty bastards. That's one of my favorite lines in the film that Brian James delivers.
Yeah. So that gets us into, we start seeing the special effects. We see like the clouds poofing up their faces and blowing the wind.
Yeah.
And I love, that's my favorite part is the special effects. We meet Chalky, which is unbelievably Russ Tamblyn.
Russ
fucking Tamblyn. Who is Chalky? Chalky. West Side Story, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, The Haunting, Twin Peaks. He did a lot. He did some oddball stuff. But I mean, this man is just, good Lord. He loved doing this role. He had a great time, and he just, from his generation, to be into this movie was so sweet. Yeah. And he does a great job. He's just perfect. He has no lines whatsoever, but he's half man, half shark.
Well, he reminds me a little of Robert De Niro in Brazil. He's just this hero that just shows up and is like.
We have Ricky Lake as the figurehead on the Filthy Whore. The boat's name is the Filthy Whore, and she is the figurehead. She underwent hours and hours and hours of makeup to do that. It looks amazing. It looks great,
actually. And they've strapped her to the front of a ship, and she has no lines.
I believe during the filming of this movie, at some point, she's like, "Guess what? I just got a talk show." I mean, it was that kind of, it happened. The talk show happened just as she was doing this movie. But before that, she had been in Hairspray.
Wait, did she do a cameo in Crybaby as well?
She did Crybaby. Yeah. So she was in John Waters movies. So she was really cool. I mean, she was, we think
cool once before that talk show. Cool. Before that talk show, and then she became Jerry Springer. Basically.
Yeah, then imagine if she hadn't have done that. Like, she could have kept, kind of showing up in cult movies and had a pretty cool career, but she ended up doing the Ricky Lake show, which was much more profitable. Melora Walters as Trina.
Willkommen.
I love as an actress. I'm not sure she's properly
she's not perfect. She's the only outstandingly not perfect person in this movie. Yeah. There's something off about her, but she's okay. I mean, she's a tough little girl. She's a tough swimmer. She's supposed to be this tough, petite, kind of wisecracking, punch you in the face kind of girl.
I have a little problem with her character in the film. I think it might be it's the writing of her character, because she's presented as this sort of tough chick who is the voice of reason, and she thinks Chris Elliott's an idiot, and then for some reason, all of a sudden, falls in love with him.
Well, I think that makes sense. That was essential to the plot. That was essential to the furthering of the plot.
I think it could make sense. It's essential to the plot, but I don't think Melora Walters sells it. And I think maybe a more skilled comic actress could have done both sides of that.
Oh, Nathaniel, your words melt like butter in my brain.
She doesn't nail it. And I agree that maybe she doesn't have the best lines too.
The character could have been written in a less jarring way.
Yeah.
I don't think that the movie does a great service to any of its female characters.
Yeah, there's something unappealing about her. Well, that's not true. There's a great female character, but there's something unappealing about her. Yeah. There's something unappealing about the Trina character. You don't fall in love with her. I do love their scene in the crow's nest. I think that's a pretty funny scene where she's trying to have a conversation with him, and he
ignores her. And he ignores her to tell her he has a crush on her.
I am developing deep, deep feelings for you, despite the fact that you have the breeding of a carnival barker.
I don't have a lot of time for relationships. Understand?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just thinking how much fun it is to roast pumpkin seeds. Did I mention I have an incredible crush on you?
I think that's a really great bit of writing. The way they're bouncing back and forth, I think is that's one of the funnier scenes. Now, the crow's nest, when they built that for them, so Chris and Adam had a lot of problems with the crew. The actors they loved, but the crew they felt did not like them ever during the whole filming. They felt like the crew was constantly working against them, to the point where, they feel like they were kind of sabotaging them sometimes. They really, they've brought that up in some of these discussions, post-movie Q&As. And when the crew, whoever was making the the set, they made that crow's nest like 20 feet off the air. And it was so silly because you could just film it 3 feet off the ground if you wanted to, and just have the illusion of it being up high. So they would have to have a crane to actually place the people into the
I was wondering about that because you can see how genuinely high up
and they take
in the
advantage
film.
of it. At one point, they take a bird's eye view of it because they might as well, because they literally built it that high up. They said it was so ridiculous, and it was really inconvenient. And they felt like that was one of the things where they were just like, why did they build it like this? There's a lot of stuff like that. There's a couple of excised scenes. One of them is, I believe, when Nathaniel is on his way to find Callie when they hit that island. He actually comes across some other creatures, which I don't know what those other creatures were. They didn't really get into that in any of the interviews I saw. But there is a scene where Chris goes through a field of flowers, and it's supposed to be kind of like the Wizard of Oz, where it like puts him to sleep. And it was a field of flowers with bubbles. Were supposed to just be like, millions of bubbles coming out of these flowers, and that was supposed to have an effect on him. And they said when they filmed it, it just looked like a 8th grade production. They couldn't believe how bad it looked. There was no way they could use it. And they really felt like it was the crew just being like, fuck you, we don't really want to do this. And we're going to do the absolute minimum for you. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And that just gives you, again, like what they were up against while making this film.
Interesting, because there's so many other things in the film that seem impressive to me, actually, as far as like, the sets of being constructed and the props and things that, considering it's a low budget film, it's all shot in a soundstage. There's parts of it that look pretty good to me. Like when Chris meets Callie and goes into her cave, the detail work around her cave.
It is. The cave is beautiful. The cave is wonderful. Although, I mean, it's pretty simple, and I don't know, but they really pull it off. It is a really cool looking cave. I know that they were very unhappy with a lot of the prop work and set work. In any case, I also love the ice monster. I think that's pretty cool. It's very simple.
That's amazing. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. So one of the funny bits is, they put him out on that raft and he gets sunburned. He's like, of course it's the cartoon, it's the Bugs Bunny joke where, he wants to put suntan lotion on. Instead, he puts like cooking oil all over himself, and he, roasts himself to a crisp. He has nothing to drink. In that scene, he actually had to drink.
He does have a carton of chocolate milk.
Yeah, he's a carton of chocolate milk that glugs out, that's like dried out. Now, when they were filming that, they were using the same water for the entire shoot. So that water had been sitting there for weeks, and the staff had been like peeing into it. He said there was like gum at the bottom of this, and he had to drink that water. He remembers that as a really actually very upsetting thing for him. He actually got quite upset about that they had not figured out a way for him to do that scene without actually drinking that disgusting water. And I
was thinking about that rewatching the movie, is the moment where he's on the raft and drinks the seawater, and obviously he's in a studio tank. And I thought, well, I'll bet that water's been standing a long time.
He brings it up in
I hope he didn't really drink any of it.
In every interview, he brings it up. How upset he was that he had to do that. He's like, that was
If you know anything about how movies are made, you know that you don't want to drink the water in that tank at all.
And they had nothing in it, no chlorine, nothing. But in any case, during that scene, you have the famous cupcake hallucination. So this cupcake comes out of the air and spits something at him.
Tobacco.
It's just so.
It's a tobacco spitting cupcake.
It's so bizarre. There's Callie. Now Callie. All right. So Callie. I love Callie.
Yes.
Callie.
She'll clean your pipes 6 ways to Sunday.
Yeah.
And the number 6 is very significant, as turns out.
For her arms.
Her character.
Her arms. Yes. He ends up at her cave. This is Ann Magnuson. Now Ann Magnuson was a real treat for those of us who I was a very arty kid. Like I actually wanted to, Joe went to art school, but I actually did want to go to art school myself. I was really into like the galleries and stuff like that. And the Keith Haring scene and, like what was going on in New York, like, especially in high school, I found that all very romantic. And so Ann Magnuson was part of that really cool New York club scene, the art scene. She was, in with Keith Haring and Kenny Scharf and, the, Club 57. She was involved with it where, they'd have these theme nights and, just everybody who was anybody. This was like the Studio 54 was like for the cheesy celebrities, but by this point, this was like an underground, very cool art movement kind of stuff. You're talking David Byrne and, that kind of more experimental, of course, punk rock mixed in with that, but almost post-punk. She was doing performance art. She was in a band called Bongwater. That was a very experimental rock band. Look up You Don't Love Me Yet, which is their cover of a Roky Erickson song. It's like I still listen to that song all the time. But anyway,
Bongwater is the only way I know.
Yeah,
and Magnuson, or it's kind of the main way I know her. Bongwater did a cover version of the Ruddles song "Love Life" on a Ruddles tribute album, and I had that album. So
so they did some great covers, but they also did just really, amazing experimental, really very experimental rock. It was kind of stuff that I was going to see when I was in my 20s. I'd see a lot of bands like that, and so I was. That was such a treat to see her. She's gorgeous. She looks so perfect. I'm wearing I have my tribute.
Very attractive.
Tribute. Also, my eyes are done in Cali blue. I dressed in my sailor. Is the closest thing.
Those are for people listening. You just showed your nail polish.
Oh yes, if you didn't. Oh yeah, for podcast. I'm showing. Sorry, I'm getting used to this camera podcast thing. So I'm showing my fingernails are done in Cali blue.
Well, I love that she has six arms, and she looks kind of like an Indian goddess, and she's painted blue. And when Chris Elliott meets her, he says, "Geez, you must spend a fortune on mittens," which is that's his observation about her with the 6 arms. And if you look closely on the set, she has a lot of nail polish.
Yeah, it's actually not blue. It's not blue.
Many jars of nail polish.
But the blue on her is just so gorgeous. It looks so good on her. Oh my God, the outfit is beautiful, and she
looks amazing.
She nails the acting.
Yeah, she plays it like a bored housewife, which we find out she is. She's like a bored housewife who seduces paper boys or something like that.
Right.
Exactly. On a regular, and she does it on a regular enough basis that she's kind of got it down to a science.
Yes.
I kept trying to figure out if her other 4 arms were prosthetic, and I think they looked like puppet arms to me because.
Oh no, I think there are people behind her.
I that would be the cheap way to do it, but I think you'd have to have 2 people behind her, and there'd be no way to get all of their arms through in the same way. So I actually think those are mechanical arms, because the fingers on the hands don't move at all. The hands move, but the fingers don't. And I actually think those are very, very well made prosthetic arms.
Really? I have to look at that more carefully. I don't know.
Because the fingers on the hands don't move at all. The actress does a very smart thing of keeping her real arms within the limits of the prosthetic arms movement so that they don't look out of place.
If we find out how they did that, I'm going to post the text like right here.
Yeah, I really want to know, because I kept trying to figure it out.
And we'll try to update. We're going to update the audience on that. But so Callie's married to Mike Starr, who is a big guy in this.
Yes,
he's really
big. Oh my God, I love this part of the movie. Her husband Mulligan.
Hi, honey. How was your day at the shop?
Sweet of you to call it a shop, Callie. We both know it's just a hole in the side of a mountain.
Was business brisk?
Brisk? Not really.
So she seduces Chris Elliott and says, "We got to be quick. My husband Mulligan will come home." And then he comes home, and he's just a very tall man who is dressed like
He's a giant. He's a giant.
He's a giant.
Officially a giant. Yeah.
He's about 25 feet tall, I would say. And he owns a housewares store on the island, complains about not selling much merchandise.
I sold 1 electric toothbrush to a flying leprechaun.
Yes.
And she's just like, "Oh, hon, don't worry. Business will pick up soon." It's just this very pedestrian
just out of middle class suburbia.
Mike Starr, one of my favorite character actors, who plays George Weiss in Ed Wood.
Yes.
And was in the Jim Carrey film Dumb and Dumber. 1994 was a big year for Mike Starr.
Yes.
He did 3 great roles.
So the other person in Ed Wood from this movie is Melora Walters. She just has a really small role. It's like a secretary or something.
Oh, at the beginning of the film, when they're having the discussion about Christine Jorgensen, when they're looking in the paper and saying, talking about the sex change operation. Oh, that's got to be Laura Walters.
Yeah.
You're
so
right.
anyways, people,
okay. Now, the whole other fandom of him is knowing him as the Commandant, Frenchie from Goodfellas.
Yeah, that's his biggest thing.
Yeah,
right?
who helps them pull off the airport heist.
Yeah,
because he's the head of security. What security? You're looking at it. I'm the Commandant.
So now at this point in the film, they were really getting tired of filming this. They were like at the end of their rope. And I think you can kind of see that, you know, at this point, the movie starts really, to me, I love Callie's scene, but I can see you can see they're getting a little petering out. And I don't know, there's something about the whole ending of this film that I think you could see the fatigue. You know what I mean? Like they almost should have shot the ending first. Do you agree with that?
I don't know that they didn't shoot the ending first. I'm not sure if they did.
They did. At this point, I know they were struggling with the giant toenail clippers. That was one of the last scenes they filmed.
Honestly, the props look pretty good to me. Those giant props and the sort of special effects of it. They're very, it's very homemade and very cheesy. It sort of has a Toho Godzilla movie feel to it when giant Mike Starr starts wading
when
into the water.
When he's holding the doll figure of
the dolls,
it's
dolls.
Clearly, and they have the fake hand.
Okay,
at one point, it's supposed to be. That's supposed to be funny. That's supposed to be funny. But
I do love when he wades out into the water and the sailors look at him and they say, "What the hell is that?" And Brian Doyle Murray says,
"It's a big guy, I guess."
See, to me, that's their petering out.
It's called hanging a lampshade on the joke. The gag is that the giant monster is just a big guy.
I know.
And he says, "Just a big guy, I guess."
Yeah. Well, in any case,
that's one of my favorite lines. That's the whole joke. The whole joke.
So this is how this movie wraps up. They defeat the giant, they get to Hawaii, and everything works out in the end. But yeah, I think that I think a lot of the lines towards the end are not quite as witty. I think they were having trouble doing rewriting and kind of keeping up the energy. I think you can feel it a little bit. But the other thing I think that's problematic as far as globally with this movie is the editing. And I'm a real stickler for editing, but I feel like this movie could use a haircut, like not getting rid of scenes, but just slicing off little split seconds or second here, a split second there, to make the pacing of the humor a little sharper. I feel like there's a lot of problems with the humor's pacing, and there's a little too much space often after jokes. And I think that really drags this movie down. And I'd love to, I just think that, I don't know why they wouldn't do this and why people don't do this, freshen up a movie, because the styles of editing change over the decades. And I think this movie would be vastly improved with a nice little fresh edit. Without even removing or changing anything, just giving it a haircut. The other thing is, I think that there just aren't quite enough jokes in this movie, even as funny as it is. I just think that, I don't know, there's a few weak spots. If only like maybe one other person had taken some really funny person had done a run through and punched up this movie, it would have improved it greatly.
To that end, Bob Elliott's cameo is too short for me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I would like to have seen a lot more of Bob Elliott, or at least a little bit more of Bob Elliott. He's not even in the same shot with his son at any point.
Yeah.
Or there's one brief moment where Chris leaves the room and you pull back to see that they're in the same shot, but they don't have any scene together. It's cutting back and forth. I would really like to have seen more with Bob Elliott. Just extend that a little bit.
I think the whole movie, it needed one more person involved who could have just punched it up a little, kind of helped them a little bit with the directing, oversaw the whole thing. You needed, like, we talked about how Reality Bites came out this same year. And I was kind of looking at I was rewatching The Cable Guy. It's such a brilliant movie. Ben Stiller directed that. I had forgotten that Ben Stiller directed The Cable Guy. Yeah. It's such a great movie. And that movie is if you really look at it, it's exquisitely directed. You almost don't, it's so well directed that you don't notice the fine detail and little touches that Ben Stiller put in it. Now that's because Ben Stiller directed a lot of his own show. When he did the Ben Stiller show, which was of course an amazing comedy show on television.
He sort of had film school with doing that show.
Yeah. I mean, that's why Jordan Peele's very good too. When they did their TV work, they were very involved with the directing and with the, how the process involved. And it's clear that Chris Elliott and Adam Resnick did not get involved with the directing of Get a Life. And that even if they had, that was such a simple show. It was supposed to be a very simple, hit you over the head, distilled kind of sitcom. So there wasn't that much texture to it. There wasn't that much you could learn about making film from doing that, having that experience. And of course, even less from really doing the Letterman show. So again, it would have been, if only they had gotten like Ben Stiller or someone like that involved in this project, that's all they needed was somebody Judd Apatow. Now, he would have been a great, actually he was involved with the Cable Guy and probably helped push that over. But, if only someone like that had just kind of lent a hand, I think it would have been a vastly better movie. And I love this movie, I'm just saying.
And I love it too, but to defend it, I would say there's no point during Cabin Boy that I'm ever bored. It zips along quickly. It's not going to tax your attention span too much. And it's going to give you just about as much as you deserve to get for those minutes of your life that you would have been wasting anyway. So stop complaining.
I know. I'm not, I don't mean to complain. It's a film criticism podcast. I need to criticize.
Oh, I don't mean you stop complaining. I mean, all those cream puffs out there, all those critics.
That's the thing too, is it was really surprising how badly this movie was slammed, because it was novel. It was novel enough that it should have got at least some cred for the novelty and for the they tried to do something very interesting here. Even if you thought they failed, it's surprising especially in that era of 94, there was quite a lot of garbage out there. As far as films, there was a lot of garbage movies that I didn't name when I was naming all those other movies, but again, they refer a lot to Pauly Shore movies. Like Chris Elliott thought, well, Pauly Shore's coming out with all these garbage movies, and then he gets another chance to make another one the next year, because you can make a mistake and Hollywood will forgive you. But for some reason,
here's why Pauly Shore got to make those same movies over and over again, because he made those same movies over and over again.
Yeah,
he gave the public and the studio exactly what they paid for and expected.
But and for some reason, Chris Elliott and Adam Resnick were not forgiven. They really came down. They were shocked. So what happened after Cabin Boy came out? It was a flop. It was panned, but even worse than that was the community in Hollywood really ostracized them. So, for example, after that, they did a pitch to Fox about a sitcom that everyone in the room during the pitch meeting loved. And then when it got kicked up to an executive, they said, "Oh, this is a great idea for a show. Who's doing it?" Chris Elliott and Adam Resnick. No, not happening. So that was their experience after that. They were kind of blackballed. Yeah. Now let's talk about other stuff that Chris Elliott did just real quick. He had done Action Family, which was on Cinemax or something.
That was Cinemax. Yeah.
It was a one-off 1 hour. You can find it on YouTube, and it's a hybrid of a sort of Mannix action television series, married with the Brady Bunch, married with the Partridge Family.
When Dad is at home and we get together, there's always a lot of love to spare. But when he's at work, we hit stormy weather, and danger and death are in the air.
And it's quite funny. I mean, it's problematic, but it's got some real problems in it, actually. But it is pretty funny.
It's funny because it's putting together these two things of a 70s cop action show and a 70s family sitcom like the Partridge Family and the Brady Bunch, and then it shifts from film to video during the show. So whenever he's in his mode as a detective and a sort of action hero detective, it's on film and it's outside on location, and he's running through alleys and shooting a gun, and then he comes home and comes through the door, and suddenly it's in a studio, and it's a 3-camera sitcom on video, and there's a laugh track, and there's an audience, and it's "Hi honey, I'm home" type stuff.
And it ends with a Partridge Family, basically, just absolutely dead on.
All doing a song together.
Dead on Partridge Family.
So when you're down and losing ground,
Don't get to thinking love can't be found. Hey, stop, look around. Somebody wants to love you. Stop, turn around. Somebody wants to love you.
And so that's fantastic. And then I think even better, I think the thing he did, one of the best things he did, which I only saw recently, I'd never even heard of it, was FDR, a one-man show. Had you seen that?
I've seen that. Yes, I have seen that.
It's really good. So that was a parody of a show that was actually on Broadway. You know, there had been a Mark Twain one-man show with Hal Holbrook, but there was also an FDR one-man show where I forget the actor.
A lot of those in the 70s.
Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff where, it'd be
an evening with Charles Dickens, and it would be,
So he was
he
was parodying that, and again, you can find that on YouTube. That's worth looking up.
All I remember from that is Chris is in the middle of doing his very, very historically inaccurate rendition of FDR on stage.
Yeah.
And he goes to the wings for just a moment, and the stagehand hisses, "The audience hates you." Yes. That I remember very well. And that was, I think, the funniest moment in it for me.
He's done many movies, well, not many, but a fair amount of movies since he obviously was in Groundhog Day. There's Something About Mary. He ended up in a lot of sitcoms. Everybody Loves Raymond. He had recurring character How I Met Your Mother and Schitt's Creek. Of course, he did Eagle Heart for Adult Swim, which was a whole show around a character. He didn't write it.
It was sort of a parody. It was sort of a parody of like a Walker Texas Ranger type.
Yeah.
Thing.
And
Chuck Norris.
I completely forgot that he was an SNL cast member. I did not remember that.
Yeah.
And I certainly
did not
was
have
watching
a good experience there.
I did not remember that. And it's interesting because he was on with Michael McKean.
Yeah.
Which I also forgot that he was
also did not have a good experience there. And I think it was also the same year that Janine Garofalo was there and did not have a good experience.
Nobody was happy. Nobody was happy.
After Saturday Night Live, in reflection, he said, "I was already my own thing at that point.
Yeah.
And it just was a bad marriage."
Right. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So so Chris Elliott continued also to show up on Letterman, of course, doing bits and bringing homemade films that he did and that kind of thing. Now, when Letterman came to a conclusion, it's funny because I had been sort of dragging you around to because I live on the Upper West Side, and that's a lot of the taping of these shows goes on just below me in Hell's Kitchen. It's like, why shouldn't we go see all these live shows? I live here and they're free. So we had seen the first taping of Samantha Bee's show, right? Did you go with me to that?
I did. Okay. I went to the
we went to the Larry Wilmore show.
Larry Wilmore, that show, long departed Larry Wilmore show.
We went to the Colbert, one of the first Colbert.
The first week of Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
Yeah. But so I accidentally went to see, because you were really busy at the time. It was something like that. I felt like you were too busy, and I got a ticket to one of the last Letterman shows, one of the final shows that he ever did in 2015. And
you never told me.
I did not know who the guest was going to be.
I was free.
I did not know who the guest was going to be.
I would have been happy to go. You never told me.
I swear to God, I did not know who the guest was going to be. It was Chris Elliott. And he sang, I told you this, but I felt terrible. And he sang To Sir with Love to David. It was perfect. Amazing. Like you would have loved it. And I will never not feel guilty about that. Cause I don't know why I didn't get a ticket for you, but whatever.
No, you told me you were going to go. I was joking. Yeah. Of course you told me you were going to go. And for some reason I couldn't go with you.
I think you were really busy. Yeah. And I really didn't expect that. I did not expect Chris Elliott to be on. So, but I have to say, so going to see a taping of Letterman, which I had never done before, when you're waiting for them to come on, Alan Coulter would do the warm-up. He would do the warm-up. Like he would do a comedy stand-up bit for the audience. It was one of the funniest things I ever saw. Now, I think Alan Coulter, and again, he's kind of post Chris Elliott, but of course they overlapped when Chris would come back. I think Alan Coulter was one of the secret weapons to the Letterman show. I adored Alan Coulter. I thought he was so fucking funny.
This one is called Dancing with the Stars. And if you've not seen it, it's unbelievable. They get regular people and they dance with the stars and celebrities. And it's fantastic. And
Dave. Dancing with the Stars is complete horse. Sorry, Alan, we've already filled up all our slots. Forget it, Alan. Audiences don't want to see you shake your sorry ass on TV. Like hell they don't.
revisiting all this Letterman stuff, I remembered how much I loved him. And I remembered how amazing he was just simply talking to the audience. We were just crying, laughing. And then the other thing that happened was then Letterman comes out, of course, before the show starts and answers audience questions. And I'm telling you, I'd never laughed so hard in my life. Like, it was the whole taping of that show was just one, again, it was sort of like the Real Life Brady Bunch. It was just one of the best comedy shows. I was just in heaven. It was just 100% wonderful.
When Letterman comes out, does he get a cheap laugh by swearing?
Yeah, of course. I mean,
that was the thing, because he was on network television. Because I went to see the old late night show at NBC, and he would come out and do the warm up before the show on that one. And the first thing he would do was say a swear word, and everybody would just laugh because it was a guy they had never seen swear on network TV. But he would swear because the cameras were off. He would talk to somebody in the audience. He would say, "What say we all take this guy out and beat the shit out of him?" And the crowd would go crazy because he was swearing.
Yeah. The only thing I remember is I for some reason I remember someone said, "What's your favorite flavor ice cream?" Which is such a stupid thing to ask David Letterman.
Yeah.
And he just went on for like 10 minutes, and it was the funniest thing you ever saw. And I don't remember what he said, but it was like he said almost nothing, but it was so funny. It was so funny. Anyway,
I think some girl was trying to be very cheeky with him and said, what's your favorite position? And he just said, "Like you don't know."
Yes, right. So anyway,
perfect ad lib.
Letterman he is one of the most naturally funny people on the planet. Like, he is. If you had just coffee with this guy, you'd be crying, laughing.
Yeah, you could give him the phone book to read.
Yes,
and his delivery of it would be very funny.
He's one of those guys. And I also want to thank you, by the way, for suggesting to me to watch Night Shift, which is on HBO. It's old from the 90s. Late Shift, which was the recreation of the battle, which there's a book written about of, Leno versus Letterman, when all of that horribleness was happening, when Carson was ending his time as
the battle for Carson's throne.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have actually watched it, but you recommended it. It was so good. And
it's very good. It's very good.
What's the actor who plays Letterman? Is just one of my favorite.
John Michael Higgins.
I always forget his name. He's
amazing.
He's so good.
He gets Letterman's body language. The scenes where you see him walking across the street as Letterman, just his walk. He nails Letterman's walk. He nails the way he would swing his arms and the way he'd bring the cigar up to his mouth. It's amazing.
And he's good in everything he does. Like, I just never remember his name, but he's good he's brilliant, brilliant. So yes.
Getting back to Chris Elliott, I met Chris Elliott briefly at that screening that you and I went to. And I didn't mention that I met him once before that, years and years earlier, when I was working in a coffee shop and he came in as a customer. And I served him a latte, and he was with one of his very young daughters, but I can't for the life of me tell you which one.
Yeah.
It may have been Bridie. It may have been Abby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So his daughter, Abby, of course, ended up on Saturday Night Live also. So 3 generations involved with Saturday Night Live.
She was sitting in front of us at that screening of Cabin Boy we went to.
Oh, I don't remember that. Wow. Yeah. So every episode, as we get to the end, after we finish talking about our movie, we are going to do a feature that is called The Comedy Coda. And the Comedy Coda is Joe and I mentioning and talking about something that we enjoy that is not film. It's comedy, but it's not film. It could be anything. It could be a book. It could be a person. It could be a television series. It could be anything. So magazine, whatever. So Joe, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first? Okay.
No, I will happily go first.
Right.
My thing is Life in the Slaw Lane. This is a sort of a song. It's kind of a spoken word piece. I'm not sure what you'd call it. It's set to music by Kippa Dada, the stand-up comic who was very, very big on the Johnny Carson show in the 70s and 80s. Kippa Dada was a pretty standard working stand-up comic. He was a guy who toured a lot and did a lot of comedy clubs, and he would do hundreds of dates a year. And he never really made it big. He never really had the career that some comics do, where they end up getting a sitcom or anything like that. And I think it was because he was a very good, hardworking stand-up comic, but he was indistinguished. He didn't have a clear persona. He would do just any kind of joke on any topic, and it wasn't like he had a very clear character or anything like that. So he was a guy who, if you saw him at the comedy club, you'd have a perfectly pleasant Friday night, but I just thought he was unmemorable as a comic.
I used to wonder to myself, I'd say, what kind of people would spend their valuable time and money to sit in a room and watch comedy? And then I realized that you people can't dance.
He was very well liked and highly respected among comedians for being a hardworking road comic. But he put out albums, and in the 80s, he started putting these little songs, sort of spoken word things on his albums. And he did one which is basically a collection of puns set to music. And it was all puns related to fish. And it was called Wet Dream.
He was covered with muscles. He came over to me and said, listen, Shrimp, don't you come trolling around here. What a crab. This guy was steamed. I could see the anchor in his eyes.
And Wet Dream is fine, but it sort of flows awkwardly, and you kind of, it's got one really glaringly bad blowjob joke in it.
Oh no, that was my favorite line.
No,
I actually wrote
like
that line down. I wrote that line down. That was my favorite. It doesn't even
fit thematically with the fish puns.
I need to read the line because I actually wrote it down. I was in a red Stingray and it was overheating, so I pulled into a Shell station. They said I'd blown a seal. I said, fix the damn thing and leave my private life out of it. Okay, pal? I thought that was very funny. I thought that was very funny.
That's my least favorite joke in Wet Dream because it doesn't fit the theme of, like when he says, I was in a red stingray. You know, stingray. It's all full of these fish puns. Wet Dream is fine, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about the follow-up he did to Wet Dream, which was called Life in the Slaw Lane, and it was a series of vegetable puns 100%. On fruits and vegetables.
100% vegetable puns.
And that is so much better. I didn't count all of the puns in it, but it starts with him saying it was cucumber the first, summer was over. They call me the Colonel, you know, just things like that. And puns on every possible vegetable you could get. And it's all woven together into this sort of hard-boiled noir story and set to music. And it's so good.
Lend me your ear and let us continue. After dressing, I stalked over to the grain station. I got there just in time to catch the 911 as it plowed towards the core of Appleton, a lentil more than a melon and a half east of Cloveland.
It's so much better than anything else Kibadada ever did in his entire career. And I'm sorry if you're that person out there who's the #1 biggest Kibadada fan. I don't know, but
it is outstanding among his body of work. But also it is, now I got to tell you, one of my least favorite comedy things is puns. I hate puns. I hate puns. Now I've had to work with people, you know, every once in a while you'll work with someone who loves puns and has to every single day just go out of his way to drop puns. And then I've had, you know, like social media friends. I know people who do it, you know, if they enter contests, pun tournaments. And, you know, and I don't mean to, I'm so sorry if you're watching, but I like, my blood pressure goes up when I see a pun. That's how much I don't like them.
Let me tell you something. I am a cartoonist for the New Yorker magazine. And one of the rules that the New Yorker magazine has is puns are forbidden. You do not submit a cartoon that is a pun.
However,
there's no puns.
This what he's done in the genre is impressive. I have to say, if you're gonna do puns, this is how you do it. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Here's why I love Life in the Slaw Lane, because if you deliver one pun, it's a groaner. If you deliver one pun, it's an eye roll. If you deliver 300 puns in a row on the same theme, it's a work of art. It flows beautifully. He delivers it beautifully. And then it's accompanied by a really great video.
Yes.
Which was, this was done in 1985. And so there's a video, it's filmed in black and white. And it's intercut with clips from animated films and that staple of 1980s MTV video, clips from Metropolis for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Well,
if it weren't for Metropolis, there'd be no videos on MTV.
Well, he just used public domain, but he has Ladislav Starovich, who I adore. Who was this amazing old animator who did really crazy spooky animation. I am
using vegetables.
Yes, but he was the one who did like the insect dance where he had took dead insects and a dead frog and had them dancing around, and he did this really creepy dog, the mascot. Anyway, I loved the video. I was all over the video. I loved what he did with that. But yeah, so interesting. I like the choice. I had never heard of this guy, and I actually watched some of his stand up, and I thought it was pretty fun. I laughed. I definitely laughed out loud.
Like I said, he was a functional comic.
It's like a meat and potatoes comic.
Yeah,
but funny. Yeah. Definitely funny.
But and he was perfectly fine. But Life in the Slaw Lane, it goes beyond that. It's a work of art.
My little story is okra now. Maybe it's small potatoes. Me, Idaho. My name? Wheat. My friends call me Colonel, and that's life in the Slaw Lane. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It flows so beautifully from beginning to end.
Yep. I also noticed he did a yuppie rap.
I haven't even heard that one.
It's some rapping about yuppies. But do you know the song "Yuppie Drone" by the Pheromones?
No.
That's the only novel. If you're going to go for yuppie novelty songs, that's the one.
I traded my GTO for a Jet 300ZX, then a BMW 5-speed ACP BPS2 bucket seat. Sound system hurts my ears, goes fast, 55 personalized license plate that says Sparky. But it's in the shop. Yuppie drone, yuppie drone, yuppie drone, yuppie drone, yup, 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 yuppie drone.
But yeah, I enjoyed learning about that guy. So that's what this is all about. All right. So my comedy coda is a web series called Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. It's British. So there's only 6 episodes. It came out July 2011, and the first one, and then they kind of slowly put them out. They ended up like doing a Kickstarter and all that stuff. Like it had been out, had a cult following. People begged them to do more. And the last one they did was in 2016. So between 2011 and 2016, they did 6 episodes. It is a parody of a children's program. It's done with puppets and people in full, kind of Big Bird kind of, puppet outfit. It's a little bit of a Sesame Street vibe to it, but it is very bizarre. It's not for kids. They do wonderful songs about learning things, but it's one of those things that has a horror and surreal vibe. It's demented, like it's a demented kids parody.
What's your favorite idea? Mine is being creative.
Time is a tool you can put on the wall or wear it on your wrist. The past is far behind us. The future doesn't exist.
I'm a computer. I'm a computery guy. Everything made out of buttons and wires.
What's that? A tasty snack? You don't want to go and eat a snack like that.
Greedy. To eat all that, you'll end up with your gums all grey.
So here we are with all my friends, and they love you, all of them.
Yes, we do.
It is true.
We love you.
You love us too.
It's trippy, and it's a piece of art. It's a piece of art as much as it's a piece of comedy. It's not for everybody. Some people are just, going to find it disturbing, maybe even. But if you have like a soft spot for people who parody kids programs, you gotta watch this. The songs are wonderful. They get very, very dark. And it just, again, goes to a surreal place that just, this could be shown in the Museum of Modern Art very easily. It probably has been, actually, where they show films, because they show these kinds of odd shorts. It fits perfectly into the art world, but it's definitely dead center comedy.
And this is your chance to start anew. And all we're asking you to do
is change your name.
Clean your brain. Forget about anything you ever knew.
You shouldn't eat food from a stranger's plate. A stranger's plate. A stranger's plate. A stranger's plate.
involved are Becky Sloan and Joseph Pelling. Those are the people who put it together and do the voices. And the costumes are all made by them. The puppets are all made by them. And the background materials are all, just artificial. Everything's made out of cloth and soft materials and, just that classic kind of kiddie show look, but really perfectly and cleanly done in a very satisfying way and, really bright colors. It looks like they're going to come out with a regular series in the near future on the BBC. So I'm hoping that does happen. They're in an art collective called This Is It. But the main thing is, the title, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. That's what the series is called. It is totally out there. They did one episode of The Amazing World of Gumball, that huge children's show on Nickelodeon. I think it's on Nickelodeon or the Cartoon Network. They did an episode called The Puppets. And just that one episode alone is worth looking up. It's totally them. They have, these surreal, scary, it's kids show scary stuff in the middle of The Amazing World of Gumball, which I guess kind of fits. And then they did a bunch of shorts with them too, which you can find on YouTube, called Waiting for Gumball, of course. So I wanted to bring up that little web series oddity. Again, I love children's parody stuff. So I just want to tie in, just throw in, as we're talking about this, a few other great children's parodies, some of which we may feature in future comedy codas, but it is very reminiscent of Wonder Chosen. Do you know that show?
No, I haven't seen that.
Wonder Chosen was on MTV2, the MTV2 network from 2005 to 2006. That's Vernon Chapman and John Lee. Vernon Chapman ended up being a producer. He's one of the executive producers on South Park. He's really does some really, really interesting work in intersection of comedy and surreal arty stuff. But Wonder Chosen, it's hard to find, but really worth it. And it was a parody of a kids show where they used real kids and it's not for kids. Do not show your kids this stuff. It's adult themes, but really funny, surreal, groundbreaking, on the street kind of stuff.
It's Middle America. How y'all doing? Stare at these keys for a sec. Hey kids, isn't this guy an idiot?
Kids on the beat, kids on the street, beat kids, beat kids.
Excuse me, can I ask you a question? Who did you exploit today?
Slaves built the pyramids. Slaves built the Parthenon. Slaves.
What do you think democracy smells like?
It smells like what comes out of my ass.
One of those things that exploits being in New York City, where they do a lot of puppet on the street bits. That's something to look up. Another would be Look Around You, which was a British series that a lot of people who are familiar with Adult Swim might know about, because I remember Adult Swim used to run that. It was
I love Look Around
You.
That's created by Peter Srafnowitz.
Yes, you're a big fan of his. Yes,
and Robert Popper, and they created this thing that was sort of like it's hard to explain. It was like a parody of the kind of programming you would see on a television in a school that would be made for schools. It was like curriculum programming that was these special little educational segments that were about 10 minutes each. It was a very dark parody of that.
The calcium molecule is built on a semi-permanent structure of 4 electrons supporting 3 protons. The protons feed electrical information to the core of the molecule, where we find the central atom, or queen atom. Were the queen atom to leave the molecule, or nest, the effects would be disastrous, as the entire structure would come tumbling down. This is known as the Helvetica scenario.
It's so good. It's so dry.
It's amazing.
Dry British humor.
You can watch it all in an hour and a half.
And then another one is, of course, Pee-wee's Playhouse was a wonderful parody of a children's show, classic.
I will debate you whether Pee-wee's Playhouse is a parody of a kids show or an actual kids show.
Yeah,
I believe it is. I believe it is a sincere kids show.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
The Pee Wee Herman HBO show, Live on Stage, which came before it, was definitely a parody of a kids show.
Yeah.
But it gave rise to, I think, the series, which was genuinely aimed at kids.
John Mulaney just did a recent thing on Netflix where it was an entire special that was a parody of the
John Mulaney and the Sack Lunch Bunch is really very good. It has the feel of the Electric Company because there's a cast of kids who participate in these sketches.
Yeah.
It's very good.
And it's got some great musical numbers in it.
I want to play restaurant. Would you like to play restaurant? Oh, won't you play restaurant with me?
Hi, may I dinner at your restaurant?
I'm sorry, we are closed for a private event.
Oh, but the woman said...
We are closed for a private event. It says on our website to always call as we do close for larger parties.
Could I order like an entree?
Sir, we are closed.
And then the last one that I'll just name, and we have to do a whole comedy coda on this, obviously, and you have to be the one to do it, is Uncle Floyd.
Of course. Oh, yeah. Boy, there's so much to unpack there.
There's so much to unpack there. We won't get into it, but Uncle Floyd was a New Jersey thing. I grew up in New Jersey, but people in New York who watch it too. People up in the Bronx when they were kids, like Joe Dater, and it was on UHF. It was on the public, not public access, but the stations that were the public, like Channel 13. Like the what are they called?
I'm not going to get into explaining to millennials what UHF was. Go see the Weird Al movie. That's what
it was. One of those shows.
Get the Weird Al movie. That's all.
Uncle Floyd. It was not for kids. Not for kids.
It was not for kids, really.
But,
and it was sort of in the format of a kids' TV show featuring a colorfully dressed clownish character with Uncle in front of his name, and it was kind of it was a sort of parody of a kids' show, almost to the point where when Pee Wee Herman first came along with his HBO show, the Pee Wee Herman show, that was definitely like an adult parody of kids' shows. A lot of people who were big, long-time fans of Uncle Floyd were crying plagiarism.
Yeah.
Even though I am certain that Paul Rubens never once heard of Uncle Floyd.
Yeah. Now, David Bowie heard of Uncle Floyd. He actually wrote a song about Uncle Floyd. But it was and John Lennon was a big fan, but it was not really well known. There was a little window of time where they were on the NBC overnight, like nationwide.
Yeah.
But it was really not very well known. And it was really, really something. It was its own animal. You will never see anything like it again.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, direct from a long engagement at Fat Boy's Restaurant at 40 Washington Street in West Orange. Let's have a nice Uncle Floyd show welcome for that dancing star of the hour, Bob the Bird, right here.
My apartment got robbed again last night.
Oh, that's terrible, Skip.
Oh, you better believe it. I mean, I didn't mind it when they took my black and white television set. I didn't mind it when they took the portable television set. And I didn't mind it when they took the color TV set. But when they changed the address on my TV guide, that's going too far. I'm not putting up with that.
I learned a lesson I'll never forget. Heaven help me if I do.
And it's very hard to find episodes. They're very strict about not releasing them. There's a few bits on YouTube, but very few.
Uncle Floyd himself is very touchy about that stuff.
Yeah, he does show old episodes. If you follow him on Facebook, you pay like $5 an episode. I did it once, and I may do it again because it was really fun. And you can actually ask him questions as the episode's going. They'll show old episodes. Now, you, Joe Dater, had an experience of actually, and now we let's not do that. We'll do a whole thing on.
Let's tease the audience by saying we have a lot to say to talk about when it comes to the Uncle Floyd show. Both of us.
The last thing I'll say about it is my favorite puppet in the history. And so there's a lot of puppets in everything we're talking about, all puppet oriented, except for Look Around You, but puppets, right? Out of the roster of every puppet that's ever existed, and I've been very aware of all of these puppets. I've been keeping track over my lifetime of puppets. Number one is Oogie from the Uncle Floyd show.
Uncle Floyd! I like F.U. better!
Oh, cut it out. It's Uncle Floyd. UF, Uncle Floyd.
So what I'm going to do on Patreon is, I've always wanted to do this. I'm going to put together a video, top 10 or top 15 puppets of all time. And others have tried to do this. Mine will be the definitive top 10 or top 15 puppets of all time by the time I get through with it. You'll have that on Patreon. My promise to you.
Well, that's interesting. That my favorite puppet is TV's Frasier, Kelsey Grammer. Very few people know he's actually a puppet. True. No, I'll tell you my real favorite puppet. This is true. It's that one Muppet that's just a round blue ball and they put different eyes and noses on it. That's my favorite puppet.
Wow. Yeah. That'll be an honorable mention. I'm gonna just so people can see him, her or him. It's Z puppet. Okay, so that's our show. That's our podcast. That's our video cast. That's our audio cast. Thank you for listening. We are, again, join us on Patreon. We'll have lots of goodies there. That's it. Do I have anything else to say? No, that's it.
Yes, you do have more to say.
I have a sign off. Remember, comedy is tragedy plus, and I forgot to come up with something. So remember.
That's it. Comedy is tragedy. Plus, I forgot to come up with something.
Comedy and remember,
you had it the first time. Why keep? You had it the first.
Comedy is tragedy plus lobster bracelets.
Oh my God.
No, abalone. All right,
nailed it.
So thank you for watching, and we'll be back. Bye.